Hello, everyone. This is Greg from the future. The following episode was recorded before the passing of Kevin Conroy, the iconic voice of Batman. Hello, everyone. This is Greg, your host of Goddamn Gamecube, and this is Season 4. Follow Goddamn Gamecube on social for updates on the show, and subscribe to us on YouTube for bonus video content. Thank you, and enjoy today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube. Greg and Riley are your hosts today once again, and today we are going to be talking about the Batman Arkham series, and a small tidbit before we start that I find interesting. So my knowledge of like superheroes and comic books and those universes is actually very limited. So something you'll notice like throughout these episodes is every villain and every twist is very new to me. Mm-hmm. And so as a contrast, my co-host Riley knows, he has I would say a vast amount of knowledge about these universes and about where these games come from.
I don't know about vast. But
well, I would say more than me.
Okay.
So I think maybe an audience perspective that maybe they'll find interesting is like there's a lot of stuff that would probably come as a surprise to me, like the origins of villains or why they're doing something. But Riley would already know that going into the games.
Sure.
But for me, because I had never seen any of the movies, I had never read any of the comics, all of the twists are new to me.
Okay.
So why don't you start us off? There's a lot to discuss.
I might ask you before we start, please interject because I'm very curious about how you felt about, such and such a villain or twist or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, please weigh in because I think that's for someone who doesn't have as much, experience with these characters. I'm curious what you thought of them late in life.
Sure. I think before we get into the bulk of the episode, the funniest anecdote I could probably come up with, it doesn't have to do with Batman. It has to do with Spider-Man.
Okay.
So when I was playing like Spider-Man on the PS4, I said, wait, Peter Parker is Spider-Man? Holy shit.
Oh, okay.
Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wait, Doc Ock is bad? Like I didn't know that. So I guess if you have that sort of humorous knowledge going in, why don't we jump right into Batman Arkham here?
No, yeah. So we're going to get into Batman. Maybe we'll do a little it's right off the bat. What is your experience with Batman before now? Like did you see the movies? Or?
Okay, sure. So my experience with Batman is when did The Dark Knight come out in theaters?
2008.
Okay, you'll find this really funny.
Yeah.
Like, so I went to Batman, The Dark Knight, and I didn't know it was a Batman movie.
Oh, really?
We're talking like that.
Okay.
Like, that's high school for me. People may roll their eyes at that, too, listening to this.
Well, it wasn't called Batman.
Right,
so.
Exactly. So I didn't know it was a Batman movie until I saw it.
Did you like it?
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea who anyone was.
Right,
And
right.
so this would have been high school for me, early high school.
Sure.
And so the reason why I played this game is probably because I saw that movie.
Right.
So so my knowledge of Batman only comes from the recent movies 2008 till now and these games.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. So this is going back to Blockbuster times.
Ooh, okay.
Where so the old movies I saw as a kid, and I liked them a lot, and I slowly sort of caught up on the comic lore and stuff. I wasn't an avid like comic reader, but I found like the Batman universe pretty compelling,
Mm-hmm.
like more so than others. And yeah, this game came out in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and it came out a month maybe before I started college. So this was a game that I started living in New York and then finished living up here at college.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of one of a very in my life kind of
sort
game.
of moments in your life games.
Yeah, I should clarify the first game, Batman Arkham Asylum. We're going to get into it. We've got a lot to say about these games. It is a third-person Batman action-adventure game developed by Rocksteady Studios and published by Warner Bros. Interactive. A lot of design came from Zelda and Metroid. Batman becomes trapped on Arkham Island after a routine arrest of his arch-nemesis, the Joker, turns into a mass breakout. Arkham Asylum is it's on this little island separated from Gotham City. It's a very self-contained setting, which I like a lot about it. It was written by Paul Dini, who created the incredibly popular Batman animated series. And what I thought was interesting, and maybe something I would have liked them to do differently is they limited the amount of plotting and character motivation he provided. So they kind of cut down on, maybe what they felt was excessive dialogue or backstory. In terms of connections here to the animated series, you also have very prominent voice talent. Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker. You may also know him as Luke Skywalker, and Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn. What they spoke about was how it was a very different experience for them, Kevin Conroy in particular, because in the animated show, they typically did things together, almost as like a radio play, whereas this was all like separate in the booths.
As we've learned, a lot of video game voice acting is done solo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of that, I wanted to ask you right off the bat how you felt about the acting for Batman and Joker in particular.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
Right? They're really good.
Yeah.
It's almost, it's one of these things where if I were to go back to that early high school for me, I had no expectation of superhero movies or video games at all.
Yeah.
We're kind of going back to the era where you would get made fun of for liking that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's 2022. We're now cool kids like Batman and shit. It's really weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, I think I asked you last night when we were talking Batman. I said, wasn't the Joker Mark Hamill?
Yeah.
I was like, that's a huge name.
Yeah.
Especially for like, if you think like 2008 when maybe Star Wars wasn't doing so hot.
Yeah.
And also, I wasn't familiar with the Batman voice actor at all.
Right.
I was like, oh, he's awesome. Like, who is this?
Yeah, he's very maybe my favorite actor to ever play Batman, because he's played him since 1991 for the animated stuff, and he has a very sort of stern but not like mean voice.
Would you say stoic?
Stoic. He's he doesn't generally. He has occasional soft side moments, but he doesn't really open up that much. Whereas Mark Hamill as the Joker is a very kind of playful, occasionally sinister, but he's mostly like very funny.
A
lot of good genuine jokes, as he should have.
Mm-hmm. It's like the most serious superhero on the planet, Batman.
Yeah, and I, as a kid, I couldn't reconcile that it was the same guy that was Luke Skywalker. Like, it doesn't sound like him at all. Something very quick when we're getting into voice acting here, they're obviously great whenever they show up, but something I didn't feel held up well at all was that you collect some interview tapes with the patients.
Yeah.
And I found these like very tonally stupid.
Yeah.
Where you are hearing the doctors record their interviews with their patients, who are the other supervillains. And it's basically, it always comes down to, this guy's really crazy. And it's like and it turns into a violent outburst or something.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't like that really. But in terms of the look, I do really like how in all of these games, Batman's cape and armor deteriorate over the course of the game.
Yep.
It's just a small little detail, diegetic as we say, where the wear and tear is visibly showing on the character model,
and it's not repairable. It's almost showing you progress through the game in a way.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, you can kind of tell where you are based on that. For these first two or technically three games, I'm kind of not in love with the character design of a lot of the like the random human characters. They feel kind of Gears of War-y to me. Like big, like Commissioner Gordon is like super jacked in this.
Yeah.
That's not Commissioner Gordon to me.
You know what? We're kind of. I feel like, well, you might have more knowledge on this than me, but I feel like in these Batman games, it's very obvious who the main character superheroes are and who the regular people are.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like
exactly.
maybe it's too overstated.
Maybe
right?
Trying to draw the comparison.
Yeah.
But it's they're kind of like bulky and weird to me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of that era.
So each location in the asylum was also designed to feel unique. For me, I don't know how well I feel this was achieved. Do you have any particular strong feelings towards the asylum buildings and stuff?
I think when you're initially introduced to it, it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I didn't expect when I played this game? I didn't expect it to be like almost like a, what's the word for this? It's like an estate.
Yes.
It's like a grounds.
Yeah.
It's not
that
really
they converted.
it's not really just like jail creepy all the time. There is kind of like this like grand sort of atmosphere to where you're walking.
There's like a
around.
history.
Yeah, sure.
To it. Yeah, I do like that because there is like a principal mansion that you go in at one point.
Yeah,
there's a prison, a couple different locations. I like the UI in this more than any of the other ones.
Yeah, sure.
It is very kind of comic booky. There's like bats that appear across the screen, like little decals. I like it a lot.
There's less clicking. There's less like pausing and clicking and tracking stuff.
Yeah. It's very simple in a good way. Notably about this series, we were talking a little last night about how you have game over screens where the villain of whatever your mission you're on, whichever villain you're the most close to at the time, will mock you, or you'll have. Then there's a couple different ones. So I do. That's a very unique thing that you don't really get.
You
too
don't
much
see that
anymore.
very often in games, or where the game over screen is like is specific to like where you are and what you're doing. There's a little cinematic.
Yeah,
I thought it's like very cute and also like makes you like embarrassed that you fucked it up.
Yeah.
It's
and they're usually, besides that one that we were experiencing last night, they're usually like 2-3 seconds long, so they're not annoying.
It's almost like they're just like making fun of you.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So this is kind of a aesthetic bleeding into mechanic thing here, but I wanted to address detective mode, and I wanted to ask you, hero or menace? What do you think? Is this good or is this shit? What do you?
Are you talking? What do I think of detective mode in general?
Yeah.
So this is hard.
Pros and cons.
Because we're encountering an era of games where games are holding your hand too much.
Yeah.
And I feel like people saw detective mode and they're like, oh, we got to put it in every game.
Right.
Oh, yeah, here's a quote unquote vision where you can see stuff.
They do it in the Shadow of Mordor thing, right?
Yeah. They do it in a lot of games now. Here's the thing. I think in universe, detective mode makes sense for Batman, right?
Yeah.
Then again, fans of Batman might be booing me right now. I don't really know.
No, I think it's totally fine.
I think because like if you are in theory a detective and if you have a bunch of gadgets and stuff,
it's pretty much like X-ray vision.
Yeah, it makes sense that you could use some sort of sonar X-ray vision to see things and highlight stuff.
Right.
It makes more sense than other games.
Yeah. For me, I think what I would have done differently about its execution in this game, because basically what it does is it highlights like enemy skeletons, like where they armed, where certain key items are and stuff, and you're almost kind of playing the entire game like that. Like if you're like trying to avoid dangerous enemies or whatever, or looking for clues. And I think what I would have maybe done differently is have it just be like a context sensitive thing where it's like, oh, I'm in like a crime zone, and then like you're looking for clues to solve a puzzle.
Or let me hit you with this. What if you had to equip it and you had to look at an enemy to see the stats? Like you almost like you have to go into a first person
Metal Gear thing.
Look.
Yeah. Because there's some of that in this game too.
Yeah, sure.
So as we're getting into more mechanical stuff here, I wanted to ask you to reiterate your comment about the controls that you had last night and the way that Batman runs and jumps versus Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. So, okay. I do want to, but I'm going to answer your question. I do want to say the thing about Batman Arkham, the series in general, it was incredibly influential when it came to certain aspects of combat and traversal.
Yeah.
A lot of games copied this.
Right.
So, like, I do want to make sure our audience know that we, Rocksteady, maybe for... I don't want to say for better or worse. It's kind of understated how influential they are as a developer for the one game they made.
Yeah.
Right. But to answer your question, in Assassin's Creed, if you hold the right trigger, you will jog and you will always parkour.
Right.
But in Batman, holding A runs and holding right trigger sneaks, and you can't do a jump out of a sneak, and it can be a little clunky.
Yeah.
I almost preferred Assassin's Creed's one button. I can't believe I'm preferring Assassin's Creed anything.
Well, the interesting thing about Assassin's Creed, and
something you never thought you'd say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we both like the first game. Let's put it on the record. that what it does is when you hold right trigger, it changes the definition of each of the buttons.
Yes.
And I think that gives you way more versatility.
Yep, of course.
So that would have been maybe better.
Yeah, I
but
think...
as far as I remember, though, there is no sneaking in Assassin's Creed.
Right, of course. And I think with Batman, I think I made this comment last night. When you're not punching or gliding or doing something, running around feels a little weird. And I don't know if that's on purpose because you're so bulky as a dude.
You got a lot of equipment. I kind of go hot and cold on how bulky Batman should be.
Right, sure.
But it does feel a little unnatural. It's kind of fun. He's just flopping around. I wanted to get further into the stealth. That's a big part of this. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting that this game has so many different facets where it's you're getting your combat, you're getting stealth, you're getting puzzle solving. You're kind of addressing all different aspects of gameplay, and I like that a lot. But when it comes to the stealth, so you have the sneaking around, you have the vents that you can hide in, you can grapple up to gargoyles and hang down and grab people and suspend them. And something interesting else about that is the panicking enemies kind of thing, where they will behave more erratically, like the more other of their friends you take down.
Sure, and depending on how you take them out, if they discover them or not, if you do something loudly or not.
Yes, exactly. Combat in particular, it was very influential, as you mentioned, the whole free flow fighting style.
I'm glad you used the word. That's kind of what they call it.
That's what they call it. Wherein your principal moves are like a strike, a counter, and a stun. You have some upgradable moves, like there's like a throw and a takedown, stuff like that. They iterate more as the series goes on. They reward you with a little bit more XP if you do some successful variations. It's like a Devil May Cry kind of like combo thing.
Yeah.
You can also utilize your gadgets to help out with enemies. You have the Batarang, which is an iconic Batman thing. Yep. There's a remote control one, which sees a little bit more utility later in the series.
Solving,
you have the explosive gel, which is you can use it to sabotage enemies or break through walls, that kind of thing. The bat claw, which is like the kind of the hook shot, I guess.
Yep.
The line launcher, which is the you repel across gaps, and the sequencer, which is the hacking tool.
Yep, the hacking tool.
And it's great because they dole these out to you very sporadically as the game goes on. It kind of gives you a little bit more utility. Maybe go back to old areas.
It's kind of the Metroidvania aspect of this. You're given new, essentially quote unquote new powers, new ways to traverse.
Yes. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, there is a side quest in this game involving the character the Riddler, and it is definitely by far my least favorite aspect of these games. I don't like collectathon stuff at all.
You and I are in agreement here.
It feels very just kind of divorced from the central experience, despite how much kind of implementation there is with the gadgets and stuff. It is a good opportunity to show off some of the tools in your arsenal. I like especially when you have to solve the riddles. I think those are kind of cool, where it's like, what is blah blah blah? That's a classic Batman thing.
Sure. But I don't believe you actually encounter the Riddler in the first game, though, right?
Physically?
You don't.
He's just over the radio.
Yep.
So before we move on into the story here and level design, all that stuff, I wanted to ask you, do you think this series in general would have benefited from a Zelda or Souls-like lock-on system?
Yes. So I think this combat is definitely functional, and I should say it's incredibly influential, and the freeform system is really good.
Yeah.
And it influenced so many games, even games like Sleeping Dogs, etc.
Yeah.
The reason why I would prefer a lock-on system, and when there's a way to almost quick fire your gadgets in combat, but unless you are physically facing an enemy, it will just
pushing the stick towards them.
It'll just kind of fire off in a direction.
Right.
And Ghost of Tsushima had this problem where there's almost like the Arkham series and Ghost of Tsushima do like an implied lock-on, where if you are facing them with the control stick tilted towards them, Batman will go to them,
leap towards them.
Yeah. But it's not always reliable.
Right.
It's one of these things where you'll get used to it. It functions. It's fine. But if I could, click target someone to shoot something at them quickly, I prefer it.
Right. And I think that is, as the series goes on, they start throwing a little bit more enemy variety at you.
Yep.
And it becomes very important which move you use on them. And if you have sort of an unreliable lock-on, I guess, that becomes a little bit problematic.
Yep. You'd rather be precise rather than, I guess,
weighing it.
Yeah, sure.
So that's just kind of an interesting prompt here. As we get into the main bulk of the story, the level design in the Asylum, I thought it was notable that it starts off fairly linear, and it gradually kind of opens you up into the grounds, and you can traverse a little bit more freely as you become more comfortable with your abilities. And something else that is notable about the setting is that they make it clear that the Asylum feels like a terrible place.
Yeah.
And it's like the warden is clearly like corrupt and gradually revealed to be insane. And I don't know, because you kind of like associate with like Batman's putting away the bad guys and that's like taken care of. But you don't think too closely at. There's a really good limited graphic novel with great art called Arkham Asylum, where it's the interior is just a very horrifying place. And I thought, like, to an extent, they did portray that pretty well in this story. So one of the first villains you encounter in the Asylum is Bane. And I thought it was interesting that his appearance here predates the movie by a couple of years.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's kind of interesting because Bane was kind of like an underused or underknown villain at the time. He was in everyone's favorite movie, Batman and Robin, which is the cheesy Mr. Freeze one. But Bane did not have like a real like sort of public image before this game. And I thought it was kind of interesting that it was a little bit of a pioneer in that respect. I call it like that. He has a pretty fun boss fight where you have to kind of monkey around him and whack his tubes off and stuff.
Yep, that's right.
And it ends with him getting run over by the Batmobile, which I thought was very funny. I did like also, this is, I think, when you get into the Batcave on Arkham Island. I thought it was really funny that he has just a little remote operation there.
Because he knows it's going to be bad.
Yeah, so it's just to stay prepared.
Yep.
So basically the plot of this game unfolds that one of the Asylum's doctors was experimenting on Bane to develop a stronger form of the drug that he uses because he's
Titan.
Yes. So he is Venom, and they're changing it into Titan. So if you're not familiar with the character Bane, he sort of like pumps himself up into like a strong man, like an absurdly muscular guy using this drug. So they're using this to experiment on inmates, to make them more resilient to, experiments and stuff like that, etc. What this doctor doesn't realize that the Joker has secretly been funding her research to blackmail her and plans to use it for himself. So that's why he staged this whole thing with the mass breakout. He winds up killing her for double crossing him, and it becomes up to you to stop this plan from unfolding. So the Titan is being produced by genetically modified plants in the botanical gardens of the Asylum, which is exacerbated by Joker's girlfriend, Harley Quinn. She frees Poison Ivy. So what is your opinion of Poison Ivy, the character?
I throughout playing this series, like I wasn't sure whether she was like your villain or your buddy at times. Like you don't really know. And she's kind of like a sexualized character in this universe,
much.
right?
Yeah. So she is, I just think it's kind of funny because there's a lot of like kind of more serious stuff in the Batman universe, and then you have like this character who talks to plants and can sort of control them and stuff.
Right, it's a little bit supernatural.
Yeah, not like obnoxiously so. I don't think. So you have a brief. I don't know how clearly you remember this, but there's a boss encounter with Harley Quinn in the prison where you have like the electrified floors, and you have to like run away from them and fight the inmates at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought that was a pretty successful
this game
encounter.
had, some really good boss encounters. Probably a strength of the game.
Yeah, I like most of them. You do have a boss fight with Poison Ivy herself shortly thereafter. She it's very Zelda-y, where you have to throw the batarangs at her when she's in the giant flower.
Yeah, very Zelda-y, right?
And put the gel on that it blows up, etc. Something interesting about the prison area is you remember this part where the warden is banging, like he's like, I'm trapped, you gotta help me. But if you scan with detective mode, he doesn't have a skeleton. And it's like over the course of the game, it changes to Gordon and like another character. And this is the Batman character Clayface. So he can like change his appearance.
Yeah. That's right.
So,
that's right.
Pretty cool. It's just a little Easter egg in that part of the game. So a part that is very vividly etched into my memory is the Killer Croc sequence, where you're going down into like the sewer section, and you have to
sewer level. Careful.
Yeah. Well, this is a rare good one. I think.
Rare good one.
So you basically have to go into his lair to find the cure for the Titan, but you have to be somewhat stealthy to not avoid disturbing the water, because he's gigantic. This character, giant like crocodile man, and you wind up having to like run away from him. Like, it's very super tense, and I think you wind up ambushing him with the gel. That was a really successful encounter for me. It's pretty tense. Before we get into the end game here, I needed to, of course, address the Scarecrow encounters.
Yeah. They're all really cool.
They're really cool. Something that I noticed upon revisiting it is that right before they happen, you can notice colorless gas coming in from vents like around you.
Yep.
So you're getting gassed with this substance that is inducing nightmares, essentially.
I believe is the first Scarecrow encounter you see other people afflicted with it, right? They're behind glass or something like that.
I believe so. There is a fake out with Gordon being kidnapped and dying.
Yes.
And that's what you think it is. And so there's another moment where you're walking along a hallway, and Batman is turned into a young Bruce Wayne.
Yep.
And you're walking down the alley where his parents were murdered.
Yep. This is a pretty iconic scene to this game.
Oh, yeah. And in this series in general. And there's a part where you go down into the Asylum's morgue, and you open up like body bags, and it's his parents.
Yeah.
And then the last one is the Scarecrow, and he jumps out at you. But obviously, the most iconic one is you want to talk about the very Metal Gear esque thing is when the game crashes.
Yes.
And it makes it appear as though your game is crashing, and it's a little fourth wall break where it's inducing fear in you.
Sure.
And the screen sort of gets corrupted, and it looks like the game is starting over. But in this situation, the Joker is driving Batman to the asylum instead. And it's like, instead of there's some button prompts to skip cutscenes. Instead of like the A button for Xbox or whatever, it's a purple letter J. And there is no J button. And eventually it winds up Joker like shoots Batman in the face, and you get a game over screen, and it says use the center stick to avoid Joker's gunfire. It's like there is no center stick. So you just have to like hit restart from checkpoint or whatever, and you get another Scarecrow thing. I love these sequences. That was like a very memorable aspect.
Scarecrow is probably, me having no knowledge, he's probably the most interesting villain I encountered playing these games.
Right.
Probably.
Did you see the one where, so he's in a lot of them, but did you see the movie that he features prominently in? It's one of my favorites. It's very cool.
No, I didn't.
But getting into the end game here, I don't really like this final boss. I think it's kind of a BioShock problem.
It's kind of like with Joker's party or whatever.
Well, I like that, but the Joker winds up injecting himself with the Titan and becoming a giant monster.
So yeah, he becomes whatever the BioShock boss is.
Yeah. It's very similar problem, because the Joker is not, to me, like a physical villain.
No, I don't know what he's almost like an evil foil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He just takes the abuse that Batman throws at him. But you do get some use of your gadgets in this fight. That's kind of cool. Interesting prompt, maybe. How would you have handled a final boss for this game instead, or an ending?
Oh, wow. Is there any? It's so hard. Is there any other way to end it other than a game that was based on a new combat system to have you just go all out with all your gear? Like,
sure.
Do you think there would be any other way to handle this? Other than what? Sure, maybe not Joker.
Not a giant Joker.
Maybe not a giant Joker. Like, it's not only is it a giant Joker, he's like swarming you with enemies too, right?
Yeah,
so,
and it ends with Batman spraying his knuckles with the explosive gel and knocking him out, which is a cute moment, but it would probably fuck up Batman's arm like pretty well.
Right.
So yeah,
what would you have done differently?
What would I have done? I don't know. Maybe make it a different. Maybe have Bane come back or something.
Yeah, have him be the big guy.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say too. Do you know a boss battle we didn't touch on that I think is kind of funny because it's very reminiscent of a battle in another game? Do you remember like the Resident Evil 4 battle where you have to fight the two Titans at once in this game?
Yes,
and
they come out of the elevators,
and you can like ride them and shit.
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that?
That's
you can have them
that's
fight each
funny.
other. Yeah.
Well, that kind of felt like a weird animated series moment to me.
Sure.
And yeah, I guess getting into final thoughts on this first game. Interestingly enough, I wasn't aware of this until recently that the sequel ideas were already being thrown around towards the end of development. And so they hid there's a secret room they had to tell people about, like under the warden's office, and it's like the blueprints for Arkham City.
That's cool.
So I like that. I always like that in a game where they kind of tease you a little bit there. Ultimately, I'm going to say that this is the tightest game in the series. Handful of rough edges, as we mentioned. Do you want to speak about your final thoughts? Maybe give it a grade?
Yeah, sure, of course. I think it might be my favorite of the trilogy, which is I don't think that's a hot take. I know a lot of people love City. And the reason why it feels the most focused, where you're in the asylum for, you're on the asylum grounds the entire time. Your gear is given to you very slowly.
Yeah.
You have a little bit of a Metroidvania drip. My favorite part about this game was actually the bosses are puzzly.
Yeah.
Where there are and especially because I just we'll talk about Night later in the show, but you don't really get that with some of the later entries.
Yeah.
Where in this game it's like you've got your gadgets, you have to do either cute stuff or puzzly stuff to defeat bosses, and also this game feels the most. It really does a good job straddling that line because these games have a lot of mechanics in them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gadgets. There's a lot of stuff you can do. There's stealth. There's combat. There's puzzle solving. There's a lot in them.
Yep.
And I think this game has probably, would you call it maybe the most focus? Because of sort of how it's designed, really, because the world is so small.
Well, because the other ones are more like open world.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose the focus whenever you do an open world. So that is something about it that this first game that appeals to me. Obviously holds a very special place in my heart. I might give it like an 8.
Okay, it's probably a B+ game for me, right? Where I think
similar.
You're in a tough spot where I think some aspects of the stealth and combat combination are a little clunky.
Yeah.
But I feel like later in the franchise, it gets too complicated and there's so many buttons.
Right.
I think it's like a B+ game.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So you want to move on to Arkham City?
Yeah, sure. A lot of people's favorite.
Yeah. So this was released in 2011. Same team as last time. After the events of Arkham Asylum, the displaced inmates are relocated to the old part of Gotham City, which is walled off from the rest of Gotham. It is fully open world this time. The new warden, I guess, is a classic villain called Hugo Strange, who is a psychologist who has discovered Batman's true identity. The Joker is back. He only has a short time to live due to his poisoning by the Titan formula from the first game.
Yep.
So kind of an interesting premise, interesting way to start out. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill return. Hamill has a very interesting performance here where he has to kind of portray him as like a sick man. Very nuanced, reflects sort of a more desperate Joker in decline. This was semi-famously billed as his last time reprising the role. And I discovered an interview with him where he said, look, like George Costanza, I need to recognize a high note and leave on it. Which I totally get. Great part. Small little voice casting thing I like here is the Mad Hatter is in this game.
Yep.
And he is voiced by actor Peter McNichol, who is a very funny guy who has appeared in a lot of like 80s and 90s stuff. He's in Ghostbusters. He's in the Mel Brooks Dracula movie. A couple other things you might recognize him from. Just a small little nod to him there.
And his part of the game was very cool.
Very cool, absolutely. Yep. I wanted to bring up, because it's not really talked about that much, I like the main theme of this game a lot in like the opening menu and stuff. Very. It feels like a very Batman-y piece of music to me. The sound design in general, I thought was remarkable in this game. There's a lot of, it clearly put a lot of effort into, when you're bashing enemies around. I watched some video of the Foley artists cracking some celery to break bones and stuff. Kind of
I love those little videos.
Yeah, very creative. Speaking of the menu, before we get too far off it, I really don't like the menu UI. It feels very like stock typeface. It almost looks like a mod.
Sure.
Almost like it's just like after the first game, I was like, dude, you had it. Like that was awesome.
You got to find the right things to rehash.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, totally. So I think I guess in terms of fidelity, it looks slightly cleaner than Arkham Asylum. I feel like this setting is very classic Batman, where it's set in the winter. There's a lot of snow and ice everywhere as you fly around, like you get the snowflakes kind of in your face in the camera. The design of the areas in this game feels the most Batman-y to me. Very gothic, Art Nouveau stuff, some hyper realism as they put it. And they emphasized in this game differentiating the disparate villains' turf by using different sort of color coding and design choices.
And the different turfs are also pretty detailed and there's a lot to do within them. Like they're pretty, when you're going to the main areas, they're pretty expansive.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And not only that, but we talked a little bit about detective mode. In this game, it was given some handicaps to discourage players from using it constantly. So most notably for me, if you're using it during combat, when you get whacked, your screen like blurs.
Sure.
And I think that's something, at least to change it up. So you have gone on record, Asylum is your favorite one. What do you think about the setting here? I maybe like it more than the setting of Arkham Asylum aesthetically. What do you think?
It's a good question. The thing about playing Arkham City as late as I did, is Arkham City is I use this phrase, it's a game of its time.
Yeah.
Where, open world games, a lot of games are going in that direction.
Yeah.
So what's a good direction for Batman? Let's get out into the city and go fly around.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's not like, I mean, as it grows, the series grows over time exponentially, but it's not throwing you out into the big city. It's like a small subset of a city.
Sure.
I like that about it.
Sure. I think the hardest part for me is someone who doesn't know anything about Gotham or the Arkham well, I should say just Gotham and Batman.
Yeah.
Gotham City, it never felt quite lived in enough for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand like how these people are living their lives when everything is just a disaster all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. So I think the animated series is pretty much the gold standard of Gotham for me, where you are seeing how people at least live. They're not like generally the focus.
Yeah.
But you are at least seeing ordinary people are crossing paths with Batman, getting caught up in these adventures and stuff. But so this one, all the inmates are, I guess this is sort of an eminent domain thing where they seized part of the city.
Yep.
And so there's a couple civilians that you have to rescue. They're pretty much like political prisoners. You're correct, though, that there aren't it's pretty much all like villains, like thugs walking around and stuff. So in terms of added features, I do like that you start out with a lot of your old gear. Like it doesn't take it away from you like some games do. You now have that grapnel boost upgrade and the dive bomb move, and I think that improves the traversal immensely, especially if we're going open world. Pretty much you can fly without limits in this one. You can just kind of glide around, and I like that a lot. A couple new gadgets, the electric charge gun, the disruptor, which you can mess with enemy equipment with, and the freeze grenades. You can make little platforms for yourself.
Yep, that's right. You have to make use of those in puzzle. A lot of these gadgets, there's a heavy emphasis on puzzle solving with your gadgets in this game in particular.
And something else that I like that kind of dovetails into combat is the smoke bombs.
Yeah.
So it's a classic Batman thing to disappear in a puff of smoke, but you can use it as almost like an emergency thing. If you get spotted by an enemy with a gun, you can just do that and get out of the way. There's a handful of new enemy types and combos you can use to dispatch them. There's like a knife counter now.
Yeah.
And a move where you can break a gun apart. Which so I like that they'd added like these are some different ways to build your Batman, if you will. Mm-hmm. Now you can pick up melee weapons. You get some bats for your Batman.
Yep.
There's the throw counters now with they throw like a piece of furniture at you. You can throw it back at them. And multi-enemy takedowns. And that's something I did like about it, where two guys will sometimes run up at you at once.
Yep.
You can take them down at the same time. There are a couple instances, I don't know if this was in your version of the game, with Catwoman.
Yeah.
Where you have some Catwoman missions.
Yep.
Feels very important to me. Adds a lot of variety to gameplay. She has kind of her own gadgets, like stuff she can throw on the ground.
Sure, and you can climb on ceilings, and you can traverse differently.
Yeah, use the whip.
Yep.
Jumping around the buildings.
Also, as someone who has no knowledge on the franchise, I didn't know who she was other than Halle Berry played her at one point. Right? I didn't know anything.
We don't talk about that movie.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that. Is she like a villain? Is she sort of your love interest? Kind of.
Yeah,
both?
like kind of both. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was sort of interesting.
So just so fans know, all this stuff is new to me from the game. So I have no idea.
So what did you? I guess what was? Did you like Catwoman? Like, did you find her a successful character?
Because it's unexpected to me. We're like, oh shoot, Batman is in it's sort of an I'm screwed situation. Cut to Catwoman,
right?
And we're gonna go help Batman. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect to play as someone else.
Yeah, kind of fun. Someone prompted them whether they were considering multiplayer for this one, and they said they would consider it not a very good use of resources.
There you go.
I'm like, thank God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, we just talked about Dead Space and all that stuff. I think it must have been very tempting for them to consider, a co-op or competitive multiplayer of some kind, and they passed on it, which is very mature. I think this game has the best boss fights in the series. I think they are very, very creative overall. We're going to get into details later, but definitely an aspect that they put a lot of time and thought into. So in terms of this game specifically, did you appreciate the additions to combat, or did you find that they were overcomplicated?
No. So the answer to your question is yes. So in this one I did. Where I think in Arkham Asylum, you got a little bit too much of hang on gargoyle and do thing.
Yeah.
It was very basic. Where I think in City, you got just enough of being able to use your gadgets in combat. Some enemies have foils to you doing that.
Yeah.
Right. You got just enough expansion that you should for a sequel.
Right.
Where we'll talk about this later. Where I feel like in Arkham's Knight, there's too much.
Sure.
There's too much happening.
So, I think the best additions are definitely the traversal, with the gliding and everything like that.
Yep.
I think your mileage may vary when it comes to gadgets in these games. Overall, I think it plays a little smoother.
Yeah,
I guess.
It does.
So, let's get right into the story. For me, this game started out with Catwoman, where she is stealing from Two-Face.
Yeah, that's right.
And it starts out with this painting. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
And it's kind of curious to start the game that way, just filing it away for later. But you start out as Catwoman if you have that DLC or whatever it is that integrates into the story. So this game, after that, it starts out with Bruce Wayne being arrested because he's protesting the creation of Arkham City publicly.
Yep.
So not as Batman. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting way to start.
You start off as a dude,
and you're just getting shuffled in. You run into some old buddies online, and you eventually kind of break out and get your Batman suit back. So, beginning of this game, you're wandering around in Arkham City, and Hugo Strange, the warden, announces Protocol 10, and you don't know what that is, and it's just kind of he keeps counting down to it over the course of the campaign. Very early on, there's this part where you rescue Catwoman from Two-Face. That's kind of a fun part, and I think you flip back to her pretty soon after, and you run into Poison Ivy again.
Yep.
And there's a good amount of kind of working people into little cameos in this game, which I liked a lot because they're all there. very early on, Joker infects Batman with his own blood.
Yes.
Which is an interesting plot turn, which creates sort of another ticking clock element for this game. And a plot point that winds up paying off way later is that he also ships his infected blood to various hospitals in Gotham to motivate Batman, because otherwise he would just be like, I don't care, I'll die too.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course.
So that's something else that kind of moves the plot along. There's a very early level in a museum that I liked. I thought there was a lot of good puzzle solving there. And this is sort of like the Penguins area. And I liked his little boss fight. Did you say you had a problem with this, or you struggled with it?
Are you talking about the where you need a certain device to approach him?
Yes.
So this is funny. I didn't have a problem with it from a gameplay perspective. My game bugged out where the entire floor disappeared. So what's really funny was I was just fighting him on an open plane of sky.
That's awesome.
The entire game just bugged out, and so when you have to approach him to kind of knock him out, it just. I saw nothing other than just shadows and nothing.
That's insane.
It was really weird. It kind of ruined the moment for me. I'm actually not sure what it was supposed to look like.
Because I think it's just him standing on a podium.
I think
shooting
so.
At you.
But to me, I opened the door into just sky.
Right.
That's about it.
What did you think of the Solomon Grundy part? The giant zombie man? That boss fight? So this is like, for me, to put it in perspective, this is a DC character that I am peripherally aware of that is based on folklore.
Okay.
And it's just one of those things where it's like Marvel, they have Thor, the god of thunder, even like next to Iron Man. It's one of those things that like makes no sense and they're just trying to like work with it.
Sure.
I was just curious what you thought about that.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right?
It's just like a zombie guy.
I don't understand why it's here.
It's I mean, probably being faithful to the source material, but it felt a little off message.
Oh, sure. I mean, especially for someone like me who knows nothing about the franchise.
Right.
I'm like, who are these people?
Right.
Like,
yeah,
why?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Penguin is pretty much like you get
pretty
who he
iconic.
is.
You get the idea.
Yeah.
Kind of like one of those like Danny DeVito characters.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And you wind up rescuing Mr. Freeze and working with him to create a cure for the illness.
Yeah.
Right here, I had an odd sort of critique that I didn't remember how the plot progressed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is Penguin has in his museum, he has like a lot of trophies, and he's keeping people prisoner, like behind glass. And one of them is a assassin that you wind up. She breaks out, and you wind up following her blood trail. I'm like, this is a weird way to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, sure.
So that was kind of odd, but you wind up following her back to the sewers of Arkham City.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is the part of the game that I like a lot, where you wind up, you find this old sort of World's Fair exhibition down underneath, like the city was built up over it. Mm-hmm. And there's like weird robots and stuff. And I thought this was very unique and not in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
And you wind up meeting up with the League of Assassins here. So they are kind of an entity in the Batman universe where the main guy, Ra's al Ghul, is he was one of Bruce's mentors.
Yep.
And they take a very different path from each other because he's more puritanical and he wants to just kill all lawbreakers versus Bruce Wayne, who's lenient on them. So you wind up catching up here because he needs a sample of his blood, and you have to kind of con your way back into the League by passing this trial.
I was going to say, this is like the Blood Oath part or something,
yes.
where you have to go through these weird platforming segments.
He drinks like some kind of sacred wine or something.
And it's almost like a fever dream or
like
something.
A Prince of Persia.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and something I didn't expect to do in a Batman game for sure.
Right.
A little bit supernatural.
And he is, I like his boss fight a lot too.
Yep.
Where you have to, it's just something like a little different for a Batman game. But you wind up getting the blood sample from him. And Mr. Freeze develops an antidote that is stolen by Harley Quinn and seemingly used to cure the Joker. And then so Batman still is infected. He doesn't have an
Sure.
option.
The thing about Mr. Freeze, it's another one of those where as someone who doesn't know much about the universe, is Mr. Freeze your ally? Is he a bad guy?
Yeah, so this character, I was going to say, you're sort of at odds with him at one point.
Yeah,
you
it's
have
almost
cross purposes,
you need him, but you can't. He's bad.
And so I was just curious, did you think he was a cool character,
Mr. Freeze?
Yeah.
He's one of these where he's teetering on supernatural characters.
Right.
And it's like, I didn't understand whether we needed him for a science purpose or he's actually like I don't want to call him like a freak, but
right.
I don't understand like how he got this way, or because, Batman treats everyone in a very stoic sort of man. Like, I know this old villain. He's from,
right.
I've experienced you a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, how is this guy? Why? I don't understand his condition.
Yeah. So Mr. Freeze is essentially, when he's portrayed successfully, he's very like a tragic character, a tragic villain, where he is, his wife has some sort of fatal disease.
Yeah.
That is a terminal disease, I should say, where she is going to die in a certain amount of time, and he cryogenically freezes her until he can perfect a cure for her condition.
Sure. Okay.
So what happens is there's a mishap with the cryo stuff, and he needs to be at a sub-zero temperature at all times.
Yep.
So that's why he wears that suit.
Yep.
But of course, because it's like a silly, these villains are from like the 60s and stuff. So he can he has a freeze gun too, of course.
Right, of course.
But his boss fight is awesome.
Yeah, so this is really cool, where like the game really tests how many different ways do you know how to stealth kill something.
Yes.
Where you have to, I don't remember how many ways you have to do it to him, but it's
quite a few.
6 or 10?
Yeah.
It's quite a few. Where you have to manipulate the environment and gadgets, and you can only do it once.
Yeah,
like
because say you want to attack him through the vents, he will then freeze the vents shut after you successfully attack him.
You have to do like, it's got to be half a dozen or more unique moves.
He's like, that strategy will never work again. And
you
have to really use your imagination.
That was a very cool boss fight.
I like that a lot. Obviously, you get the better of him. What winds up happening here is sort of an odd twist of events where Raish's daughter Talia is a significant character. She's like a former love interest of Bruce as well. And she promises the Joker immortality through her father's Lazarus pit in exchange for Batman's life. And at this point, Protocol 10 begins, and you realize that this is just the plot of the Purge movies. So this came out before them.
Yeah.
But essentially what they're trying to do is they have all the former inmates of Arkham Asylum in this city, and they are going to just wipe them out.
Yeah.
And they just launched this huge, with all their armed guards, the security forces are planning on just wiping out Arkham City. And you might think this is tempting, but there are a lot of innocent people in the city as well.
Sure.
Like the political prisoners and whatnot.
There's always that push and pull with Batman, though, right?
Of course.
You don't want to kill, but God, I really want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Hugo Strange and Raish are obviously, they're working together on this. So he's fulfilling, he's kind of Raish's number 2, I guess, in all this. And at this point, Batman is like trapped under the church rubble, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
And you have that awesome Catwoman heist sequence where she has to kind of sneak around these guards and get her gear back.
Yep.
And there's a kind of I don't know if you did this, but there's an option here whether to help out Batman or leave. Did you do this?
I think I elected help Batman, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, what happens is if you elect to leave, she says screw him, and she walks off, and the credits roll, and then it rewinds it, and she's
amazing.
like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah. That's amazing. I didn't realize you even had a choice.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But so eventually, I think when you regain control of her, you can fight Two-Face again. There's a kind of interesting stealth sequence with her.
Yep.
And then a incredibly climactic sequence where Batman has to climb the tower, Wonder Tower.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought this was a very good sequence because it's almost like a Zelda thing almost, where you're climbing Ganon's tower. Similar situation. Pretty tough stealth section there. Hugo Strange is executed here for his failure, and he winds up double-crossing him and blows up the tower, and Raish falls to his death. And I thought it was kind of interesting that it's like at no, real fault of your own that this plan falls apart. like Batman doesn't really have much agency in this moment.
Sure.
It's pretty funny. You wind up, there's a finale at the movie theater, which I thought was a pretty interesting choice. Talia has the cure to prevent Joker from healing. Like, so basically you're like, hey, I saw him cured before. How is he still sickly? And he winds up killing her for the cure.
Yep.
And what winds up happening is that the healthy Joker you were seeing is the Clayface character.
That's right. They do a little fake out.
Yeah, and I love this final boss fight.
Yeah,
where you have to. He turns into like this big mud monster.
Yes, I remember this.
And I thought this was more what I would have liked to have seen in the first game.
Yeah,
where you have a character that is known for being physical and big and you wind up having to freeze him with the freeze grenades.
Yes.
And you take up her sword. And Batman has a sword now, and he's cutting them apart.
It's awesome.
That's the sound design I was talking about with the shing, shing, it's
I remember one of your messenger messages to me, ka-shing. Right? Yeah. I was like, what is he talking about?
And then you revisit it. Yeah. But so the Lazarus pit here is destroyed, and the Joker has no chance of survival. He inadvertently destroys his only chance of survival when he attacks Batman. So the vial falls to the ground and explodes. And that's like possibly one of the I should explain for the audience, the Lazarus pit is tied to this Raish character where he is actually like centuries old, and he will restore his bodily self to his younger self through the use of this pit. And so you're trying to like prevent him. Batman keeps preventing him. He's like, you've lived long enough.
Yeah.
So that figures into the plot here at the end. And Batman carries the Joker out. And what I thought was kind of interesting, it echoes that painting from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the intent was there, where if they were trying to draw a specific parallel, what that means, I have no idea. But an interesting callback nonetheless. So that's the end of the game. I wanted to briefly mention there's a little epilogue DLC that I played where it's just kind of a fun little romp where Harley Quinn has kind of taken over the Joker's old turf, and Batman actually gets captured. So you play as Robin.
Yes.
And he sneaks through, and he has like a little like a staff that turns into a bulletproof shield. And I was like, oh, it's cool. He plays a little differently than Batman or Catwoman. So I enjoyed that for what it was. So I have a final thought here about the story in particular. We're going to get into some side quests in a moment.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think this is the best main story in the series for sure.
Yeah.
But you kind of have two plot lines that feel semi-coincidental, where you have the Joker Cure plot line and you have the Arkham City in general plot line.
Sure.
And for me, they didn't quite dovetail as well as they should have.
Yeah.
If you were to do it, what would you have changed?
Oh, wow.
What would you have preferred to see? Because I know this isn't your favorite.
Are you saying like perhaps they bit off too much, or like you have the city plot line of, this sort of, you're sort of segregating off all thugs and prisoners off to this part of the world, but now Joker is sick and they're trying to handle both at once? Yeah,
and I mean some of that is because the Joker's influence is receding because he's kind of ailing health, so the other villains are rising now. But I feel like they're kind of equally important, and they kind of coincide almost accidentally.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I don't know. Were you satisfied by this story? I mean, I thought the Joker dying was pretty intense.
Yeah, well, I think the Joker dying is probably the most impactful, because in the Batman universe, like, Batman doesn't kill anyone.
Right.
And it's almost like he doesn't kill Joker either, but but it was kind of in his hands to help him.
Yeah. Well, he says at the end, you want to know something funny? I still would have saved you if I could. And he said, that is pretty funny. And he dies.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
interesting quandary for Batman, because that's almost like his other half.
Yeah, of course. It's so hard to say, because when you have the setup of City, but it's running parallel to the Cure, but then that's a tough question. Like, do you have like maybe initial thoughts that'll like maybe get my my brain in motion here for what we would have changed?
I almost think that maybe the Joker thing should have been the main story, and then the undercurrent of Arkham City should have maybe been something that you were working towards. Maybe like if you do the other side quests, then you get this finale where you realize the purpose of Arkham City, and that's how the game truly ends. You know what I mean?
Sure. Okay. But
So
do you
that's-
think they maybe introduced it too early, but then it's kind of used as a vessel for the Joker plot?
Well, once you finish the main, so we're obviously going to dovetail into side quests and characters for a moment.
Sure.
But I think once you finish the main story, it feels like it's over.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of mopping up at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
And I kind of would have preferred, like in these open world games, that you could have like a main Joker story and then kind of weave in these other side quests and side
Undercurrents.
characters a little
Yeah.
bit better. So I wanted to briefly mention they're not prominent characters at all, but I like the twins that are like, they both have one arm and you fight them in a little like almost like a Titan boss
Yeah.
fight themselves. They were kind
Yeah.
of fun. They reunite at the end. I think that there are a lot of great puzzles in this game, so I 100%ed these games.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a lot of great puzzles, but this is definitely the most tedious Riddler side quest of all of them.
Yeah.
There are 440 objectives.
Oh, my goodness.
The secret maps from Arkham Asylum are replaced by the Riddler informants throughout the city, or these guys who are like glowing green. And so they're like different members of gangs and stuff that are like secretly doing work for Riddler, hiding his stuff. I feel like this aspect of these games is like a little too gamey for me.
Yeah.
Where, you know,
you
and
start doing the collectathon.
and how does he know who's a Riddler informant? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, it takes the detective work out a little bit too much, that green glow thing. But every so often, you know, you complete like 50 riddles or whatever, you unlock a new room where you're rescuing like members of this firefighter team. And I think this is all it should have been in the first place. And I'm going to draw a comparison here where Ocarina of Time, you had the Gold Skull Tula quest,
Yeah.
where it was you collected them over the course of the game. And then in Majora's Mask, I think it's better because you have the spider houses where it's like all the puzzles of that nature and looking for little collectibles are in this contained environment.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been I would have liked that a lot better for Riddler.
Almost like a Riddler house.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Totally. There is I forgot about this until I replayed this game recently. There's a Bane subplot.
Yeah.
Where
yeah.
you detonate other Titan containers that have been left over.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of funny where I think it's kind of a meh plot line overall, but it's kind of funny that he acts like he's doing it for like the better of everyone. Like, we need to destroy this stuff, Batman. And he really just wants to be the strongest guy again.
Yep.
Kind of a funny motivation. I don't know if how many of these you messed around with, but I was just going to rhyme off a couple of the other ones. Victor Zaz is he's a serial killer, and he will call you on the phone, the payphone, and you have to trace his call, like to follow him around. And he's kind of a minor Batman villain. He like carves his kills into his skin and stuff. But it's nice that he gets his own little subplot. There is a Deadshot, who is a sniper character, and you have to wind up. It's almost like Disco Elysium, where you trace the
trajectory,
of his bullets to track him down. Hush was a very interesting character where you find a lot of people who have been killed and their faces have been removed, and they have like big bandages all around their heads and stuff. And the character of Hush is a similar story to Bruce Wayne, where his parents were also very affluent and he became jealous of Bruce Wayne, so he killed his parents and becomes kind of the anti Bruce. And what winds up happening in this subplot is that he is using parts of people's faces to reconstruct Bruce Wayne's face. And so you wind up being faced with yourself, essentially.
Yep.
And he winds up getting away at the end of this game.
Yep.
There's the character Azrael, who is he's the red armored guy.
He's almost like this, what's the word for him? Almost like Inquisition-y sort of. I wasn't sure like if he's a good guy or not. I don't really know.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Totally. He's very, very cryptic. you wind up so you just see him on sporadic rooftops just watching you, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like I want to figure out
because you
what's going on
encounter
with
him
this guy.
more in the later entry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so in this one, he winds up he delivers sort of a portentous message of like Gotham will burn and you will be tested, etc. And he disappears. And last but not least, I wanted to mention the Mad Hatter.
That was probably one of the coolest sequences.
Why don't you talk about it?
Well, it's very unexpected. Because I played Arkham City for the first time within the past year.
Right.
And, when you're doing these open world games, I'm always balancing, do I want to quote unquote 100% this? Should I do all these side quests? Because I don't know who the Mad Hatter is.
Right.
So I didn't expect to have like this fever dream sequence. Well, incredibly bizarre.
You get tricked into it because you get a message from Alfred that says, we have the cure for the Titan infection.
Yes.
And you wind up drinking it, and it's the tea, the Mad Hatter's tea.
Yes.
And no, he's an odd character where he is obsessed with Alice in Wonderland.
Yep.
And there is a very, very trippy thing where Batman drinks this tea, he passes out, and he wakes up with like the rabbit hood on his head. It's very strange looking. And you wind up having to fight off like I guess other people he has bewitched.
Yes.
And it's a very cool sequence where you're just on a falling like clock. I'm like, dude, this is out there.
This series really goes after some of these like fever dream moments or like these sort of hallucinogenic moments.
And they're often welcome because you feel like Batman's internal psyche must be very messed up. So he's conjuring all these
And what I
things.
liked about the Mad Hatter sequence is it's very succinct.
Like, it's very quick.
Yeah, it's very quick.
And you wind up, Batman puts his foot through the Mad Hatter's hat.
Yep.
And he leaves him crying. But it's a very odd because it's just in the city. It's just you wind up opening a door and it's just a door that was previously unopenable.
Yep.
So I like that about it. So I wanted to ask you before we get into final thoughts here, did you feel that this type of side questing worked for the Arkham experience?
Well, it's mostly no, because I think, we're running into one of these, I think you had called them pitfalls of open world games, where the main plot feels less urgent when there are other things to go pursue.
Yeah.
Where, if the Joker is dying or you've been injected with a virus, why are we side questing?
Exactly.
Like, why is this happening? And, like the Mad Hatter was probably one of the better ones or best ones.
It was more or less worked into the story.
Right, sure. But when you're encountering all, like, why am I going off and encountering all this weird stuff? Isn't there something we got to do? Well, we're on the clock.
That's sort of a problem I have, is that these are all, I think most of these are interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting characters that you experience, but it's just very divorced from the central narrative. It just feels kind of like an episode of the Batman show, maybe.
Yep.
And what's odd is that, like, I feel like a lot of them are better completed after the main story, like where you have where Batman has time to think about it and clean up things, but it feels very empty. And another problem I have is that this Mad Hatter thing you can actually skip, and then when you finish the story, there's no reason for Bruce Wayne to go after a cure after he's already been
resolved
cured.
The plot.
So they should have maybe had an alternate
or
way
maybe
to
have
get
it be
into
forced into the plot.
Sure, exactly.
I think we're in agreement there.
So getting into final thoughts here, I consider this a very worthwhile 40-hour experience overall. Kind of obviously less tight than the original, but I do think it is a substantial and tonally appropriate sequel. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure, yeah. So I only... Arkham City was one of these games where I picked it up and put it down a couple of times over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
I just never finished it. So I chose to do, in preparation, for the show, I chose to do a clean run.
Yeah.
Where I start from the beginning, let's go all the way through. And I think what happened is, playing this game in 2022... It's tough to go back to open world games of the 2010s.
Yeah.
Where I just feel constantly distracted by checklists and side quests.
Yeah.
Where I feel like the main plot of the cure and the Joker dying is very compelling.
Yeah.
But I'm a little distracted by these open world formulas. And on the show we have a little bit of a poor taste for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I can it's there's also some positive to it too, right? Where combat gets a little bit expanded.
Yeah.
Where you can do a little bit more in this environment, and you get to let Batman breathe a little bit and glide around and make more use of sort of the Batman universe.
Yeah.
But you fall into these pitfalls where it feels not unfocused, but you start to go that way.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit inherent to how the game is built.
Yeah, I guess this is maybe a weakness of my scoring system that I would also give this game an 8. I think that's where I'm going with it. I think it is more or less as successful for me as the first one, just in different ways.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, where I think the first one I gave like a B+. This game's like a B for me, right?
Yeah.
Where I only consider it a little bit lesser than the first one because it has that twinge of being a little unfocused because of what open world games do to games.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you that. Well, here's the positive. I really loved all the puzzle solving bosses. That comes back.
Yep.
The main sort of hubs or the main, I don't want to call them fortresses of the villains.
Yeah.
They're very expansive.
Yeah.
Like, when you have to avoid falling in the water and making ice pits in that one. In that
steel mill,
the steel mill, or you're trying to do that puzzle boss with Mr. Freeze, and I'm not sure if he's a partner of mine or not. They do make the I guess the evilness of Gotham City feel lived in, where it makes sense that these guys have territories and why you're working with them.
Yeah, exactly.
I would give it a similar rating. It's like a B.
Yeah,
right. I would say so.
Sure. Okay, so
oh God,
let's get into. I want to start off by saying we're going to be primarily discussing Arkham Knight, released in 2015 by the same team. A big asterisk here we have is that WB and Rocksteady evidently decided that next gen was the best option for a threequel.
Yep.
But WB felt that 4 years was too long a wait between games. So they tasked a team known as WB Montreal with creating a game called Arkham Origins.
Okay.
And did you play this when it came out?
Nope.
So I started it when it came out. I was like, oh, another Arkham game. Okay. I wanted part 3, but let's check it out. I encountered so many bugs.
Yeah.
And it felt very much like a mod. Almost, where so this game, Arkham Origins, takes place on Christmas, and so a lot of it is just Arkham City with Christmas lights.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, dude, come on, have a little shame.
And this was
here.
released as a mainline entry,
yes.
So this was not a DLC.
So I
entry.
finally, I put it down at the time. I finally picked it back up and finished it. You get a lot of sort of the recycled Arkham City stuff in there, because that game sold like gangbusters. A lot of people like this game. I really don't. This one, it felt very much like we need a good quarter. Like, let's get the cash grab
Let's
in
get
there.
a Batman out.
And what bothers me is that, so the thing that we talked so much about is Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are not voicing Batman and Joker in this game.
Big problem.
Big problem. I don't like the new performances at all. Troy Baker voices the Joker.
That's right. This is the one where he's the Joker.
But they build this game as this is before Batman met the Joker, and they introduced it as the primary villain is a character called Black Mask. And they did a little bait and switch where you start off with that, but he takes the black mask off and it's the Joker. And I'm like, can you just do one game without the Joker?
Right. Now, do you know why they did not use Mark Hamill and the Batman actor?
I think this game just needed to make a profit, and maybe they were a little too expensive.
Wow. Okay.
Because these are seasoned. Well, I mean, Mark Hamill, a pretty expensive guy.
Well, Troy Baker can't be cheap.
No, but at the time, this came out in 2013.
Oh, sure. He's at the start of his rise.
Just the start.
Yeah, sure.
So, I don't want to say he does a bad job, but if this is supposed to be the same universe,
it doesn't work out.
You get a nice little sequence at one point where you see they go back to the Killing Joke comic where you find out Joker's origin story, and it's a very nice kind of. It starts. It's a little trippy. It shows you his relationship with Harley Quinn and that kind of thing. But overall, I did not like that one. I didn't feel like it was worth discussing at length. Probably would have given it like a 5 out of 10.
Sure.
It was very, very unpleasant for me. So we're going to get right into the actual third one called Arkham Knight.
Which I technically finished today. Which is funny.
So we stayed up super late.
Yep.
We watched Greg finish this game. I helped out a little bit. So this game, I mentioned Paul Dini. He wrote the first 2 games, seasoned animated writer, replaced by a veteran DC figurehead called Jeff Johns. And I definitely like Dini's writing a little bit better. Though I do think this game has a lot of strong qualities. This takes place 9 months after the events of Arkham City. The villain Scarecrow is back, and a new character, air quotes, known as the Arkham Knight, launch a terrorist attack and full invasion of Gotham. Gotham is evacuated, leaving only criminals to roam the empty streets. So this is kind of interesting where they finally are letting you out into Gotham City for the first time. I like the design of the city. I don't think it's as Batman-y as the previous one, but I like the design. Their philosophy, I guess, was to make a city that felt out of time. Like it didn't like it could have been in the past, could have been kind of futuristic. And that's what I like about Gotham in general, is if you can make it feel like a little like that Resident Evil 2 thing where it's a little fantastical, but also grounded in realism.
Right, where it takes place in the 90s, but you don't want to make that incredibly obvious.
Yeah.
It could be any time.
Yes, exactly. Designed to be wider and taller than Arkham City for various reasons, mainly traversal, but densely packed with side quests and optional content to avoid feeling empty.
Sure.
And lastly, when it comes to visuals, you finally get some blimps, as I mentioned, that they feel very intrinsic to the Batman experience, because we don't have a lot of blimps these days. What did we say? They
were just a really bad idea by humanity. Blimps were a bad idea, but they look cool.
Right.
Yep.
So, interesting prompt maybe about this game. Did the lack of civilians in Gotham City bother you at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Because I'm sure we'll talk all about this. I think I said this to you right off the bat. Arkham Knight tonally feels the coolest out of the ones I played.
Right.
I don't want to spoil too much because we're going to talk about the opening sequence when you're actually playing as civilians.
Yeah.
I said, oh, finally.
Right.
You finally get to have this place feel lived in. I'm in a restaurant of like other people who are not superheroes and supervillains.
Yes.
To me, that intro sequence got my attention right off the bat.
Right.
But I don't want to say too much because I'm sure we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I want it to feel more lived in, show me real people.
Right. So these games, there's kind of a meme where a lot of the reviews were like, it really makes you feel like Batman. And yes, it does. But the problem I have is that none of them really capture what you feel in like the movies and like shows and the comic books where there are civilians.
Yeah, well, I was also going to say that statement, it makes you feel like Batman, not really, because you never see his personal side in any of the games. Not really.
Not a lot.
Only in really Scarecrow sequences, right?
Well, little moments here and there.
You don't really have those like moments in the films where Batman is Bruce Wayne and he's talking to Alfred. They're kind of, having their debriefs one-on-one together. You don't get it at all.
I mean, that is, I'll give Origins a point. That is the only one with the actual Batcave where you can talk to Alfred.
Sure.
But even then, you don't really get the personal side that much. So that kind of, I felt like maybe a missed opportunity. Like there are characters that you talk to who are civilians, but they're not like wandering around in the city or anything. As far as presentation goes, I think this is, on PC at least, one of the best looking games I've ever played. The PC version was notably unplayable at launch.
Yep.
But now it has been patched up. It looks exceptionally photorealistic. And I mean, I'd love to show you sometime if you want to come over. But there's a lot of outstanding lighting, and it's raining perpetually in this game.
Yep.
And it's like whipping against the camera, and it just looks like real life.
Because this game takes place over the course of one evening.
Yes, and Halloween, just like the new movie.
Yep.
But this came out in 2015, and it looks better than a lot of modern games, and I can't imagine like the amount of effort that must have gone
Sure.
into
Well,
that.
I think tonally and aesthetically, like I said before, it's probably the strongest game in this franchise in terms of that.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin Conroy, of course, returns in his self-described favorite performance.
Yeah.
I think of these games. He puts a lot of sort of gravity into like, this is it, like this is the last go around.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot. Other notable additions include Jonathan Banks as Jim Gordon from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Very funny guy. And Scarecrow, I wanted to get your reaction on, Mike. He is portrayed by an actor called John Noble. Do you remember who this is?
No.
I'll give you a little hint. Can you sing Master Hobbit?
Wow.
You hear it now?
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your head? Yeah, so he is Denethor from the Lord of the Rings
That's
movies.
awesome.
He's great in this. Very, very suspenseful villain. I think he's in the show Fringe as well. But yeah, generally strong voice acting across the board here. And something else that I liked about it is that this one versus the first one, this lesser extent, Arkham City has some stuff like this too, but there's a lot of skins available for the Batsuit and the Batmobile from various like comics and movies. So they have like the Dark Knight suit, Ben Affleck suit, like Michael Keaton, all that other stuff. I like that variety, just so you can change it up. There are continued improvements to the flight and grapple controls, so it is incredibly fluid, especially when all your stuff is fully upgraded. Now there are like the fear takedowns, which are like you can ambush people and like sort of
kind of like the later Splinter Cell games, where if you want to like auto stealth kill people, you have to do something, and you can kill a couple of people. I should say you can take down a couple of people at once.
Yes, exactly. As well as environmental attacks, which I wanted to point out. I think the first time I saw that in a game like this was Sleeping Dogs, where you like throw a guy into like a fish tank or whatever. That kind of thing. And it's so funny because that game was clearly influenced by Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, sure.
You have a couple new gadgets this time. The Disruptor is now like a rifle, and you can sabotage guns, equipment. There's some medic enemies now that will revive incapacitated ones.
Yep.
So you can use that. You can upgrade it in that way, as well as a voice synthesizer, which you can like trick henchmen into like obeying like
the voice of Joker, the voice of Harley Quinn.
Yeah, Arkham Knight or whatever. And I like that a lot. You can kind of trick them into traps or doing stupid things. Occasionally you do get these dual combat scenarios. What did you think of this, where you can kind of team up with Catwoman, Robin, Nightwing, and you can switch between them and do like team combos and stuff?
Oh, sure.
Did you enjoy these moments?
Yeah, so I definitely enjoyed them. What I think it's a little undercooked. Yeah. Because when you switch between characters, there's no difference between like how they
Not a ton.
And like when you do a dual combo move, it just changes which character you're using. It's like, I think aesthetically, it's almost, I would use the word, it's cuter more than it is like practical.
Well, I mean, so they do have some different things. So Robin, I mentioned, was in the previous
baton.
game.
Yep.
Nightwing is notoriously a very popular character. He was the original Robin.
Yep.
So he is like kind of doing his own thing now. And I love whenever he's in a game, he has those sticks.
Yeah.
And you go, like, I love that. It's so good. But no, he's a very fun character to play around with. You kind of get into them with like the side missions and stuff like that. There is a kind of an interesting one where Catwoman is being held hostage by the Riddler in this one, and you have to switch between them to fight certain enemies. So she can only take down certain ones. He can only take down certain ones. Pretty cool. There is a great amount of the militia enemies in this one, which are overall much more versatile than previous groups of thugs or guards. They have a lot of different equipment, and they have the ability to control surveillance drones, which I thought were kind of an interesting, like they have the flying above you. You have to hack them, stuff like that. Something different. Some enemies also have gear that insulates them from detective mode. So I like that as well, too, because it's like they're kind of adapting to the Arkham formula a little bit.
Some enemies will foil your detective mode and stop you from being able to use it.
Yeah, they can track you down using it.
And some enemies will jammer it where you can't use it at all.
Yes, and they wind up as it turns out, the Arkham Knight knows a great deal about you, so he knows your tricks, and he tells them blow up the gargoyles.
Yep,
You have some enemies that do that, so you can't pull your usual tricks.
This franchise has done a good job of slowly putting in, I call them foils to your gear, or the ways to stop you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So we are going to get into a contentious aspect of this game called the Batmobile. So there's two modes here. There is the pursuit mode, which is you're kind of chasing after people or traversing the world. You have the classic, afterburner. You have a missile that you can knock cars over with. You can. So this game does a couple interesting things when it comes to his no kill code, where instead of running people over, you'll like kind of shock them.
You kind of zap them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
And you also have just the eject button, where you can kind of eject into a glide. And so this part of the Batmobile, I think, is totally fine. If you're going to introduce the Batmobile, it's a very important part of Batman. It looks great in this one, and I think it integrates reasonably well with the open world gameplay, and it gets you back into that. You can get in and out of it very quickly.
And we haven't seen the Batmobile yet. You got to put it in.
Yeah, right? only very briefly in the first game.
Right,
and it gets destroyed when you take out Bane with it.
Yep.
But what I don't like as much, and what I don't think you like as much,
oh my god,
is it can convert into a tank.
The battle tanks version.
So you get a couple things at your disposal here. You have a similarly kind of funny non-lethal cannon for the infantry, where you can just knock people over with it. It's a rubber bullet, I guess. But when you're fighting like enemy tanks, there is also a minigun, a tank shell, a missile launcher, an EMP, and you can hack. And pretty much all the enemies you fight in this mode are drones.
Yeah,
they're unmanned, which I think is just like a little too convenient for Batman.
Yeah, we're like, exactly. Batman doesn't kill, but don't worry, the tanks are unmanned.
Right,
so you can blow them up.
It's a little...
all right.
So what I do not mind about this is that it can also be remote controlled for puzzle solving or fire support. I like those moments where you're kind of using them,
in tandem, flipping back and forth.
Yeah, you probably didn't experience this as much as I did, but they're used pretty well in like the Riddler puzzles, that kind of thing. I like it in that respect. I think that is the extent that it should have been in a non-driving capacity.
Sure. These tank sequences, dude.
There's a lot of them.
Come on.
There is a... and it's generally a commonly held belief that there was way too much emphasis on the Batmobile.
And it's like, but also the tank combat never changes. Like, sure, you get one or two more enemy types, but you're sitting there waiting for right trigger to reload so you can just shoot it again.
Well, what's interesting too is that I feel like, so I played a little bit of this to relieve you last night, and what I found interesting is that I felt like I enjoyed aspects of this game way more because I played it more. Like I did more of the side quests and stuff. You get more XP and you get better abilities and upgrades. And so that battle, like near the end, was so much easier than it was when we were doing it last night. So that is something that can be said for the game. And by design, I did like this about it, that buildings hit by the Batmobile, they kind of suffer like cosmetic damage. They just break away without slowing you down. Because like if you were going to be impeded by a collision at all,
it would be impossible to play.
It would be impossible to play.
Oh, absolutely.
It would really, like, in terms of driving the Batmobile, it would be such a chore.
Yeah, and I think what I want to say to our audience too is, if you guys have, followed the show for a long time, vehicle sequences are not my thing.
Sure.
Driving in non-driving games, it's a hard sell for me.
Sure.
I'm like, I just don't love it.
So I like it in games when it feels pretty connected to, like, I like it in Halo when you can just hop into a warthog.
Sure. I think what I mean is like, I think I kind of went through a series of emotions in the first 2 or 3 hours playing this game.
Right.
Because I had never really played it before. And I was like, man, this intro is tonally so awesome, but oh my God, there's a GTA chase sequence. I don't know if I want to play this. Like, I don't know if I can do this.
Well, why don't you talk about the opening diner sequence?
Do you want me to? You want to get that far?
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So this game really grabbed my attention right off the bat, where you're playing as not Batman, you're playing as a police officer.
Yeah.
You walk in, I think it's Polly's Diner, is that right? And so I think you order the usual or something but then you say, "Don't tell my wife I want pancakes and bacon," or something like that. And then a civilian comes up to you and is like, "Hey, there's someone smoking in the corner. You want to tell him to stop?" You said, "Yeah, sure, whatever." So, you have to do it. You're in control. It's first person, too. You're in first person mode.
And you can kind of wander around and look at details on the diner and stuff a little bit.
Very cool. So you walk over to this person in the corner smoking, and his bag is emitting some sort of gas.
Yeah.
And then gas goes off. And, of course, spoiler, I guess it's Scarecrow. And he's emitted some sort of fear gas or whatever.
Right.
And so you're almost in like a zombie movie scenario where like patrons are attacking each other and either punching each other or killing each other. Mm-hmm. And you take your gun out in first person mode. And I chose not to fire my gun, but I think you can.
You can. So basically what happens is you run into this police officer later in the game, and he'll either be sort of catatonic, or if you wound up shooting what are actually civilians, he will be like devastated, like unable to live with himself. Kind of an interesting consequence to that kind of
no, I agree,
because they look like monsters.
Yeah, and this locked me in for the game, and I said, okay, well, this game is very serious. Also, it was kind of spooky,
very scary.
Jeez,
it's on Halloween. There's a lot of decorations everywhere.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I like that a lot.
Me too.
So in terms of the story, I find this a little stoppy-starty. Like very kind of broken up, another kind of exacerbated open world thing. Many missions, I think, seem to deliberately derail you into side quests. Like they're kind of setting up, you can do the Two-Face bank robbery thing, like it's a little branching.
You know what this game didn't have? They didn't really have the go to this main hub and it's very extensive for this next part of the game. Or go to the steel mill and it's very long.
Right.
Or go to the penguin section and it's a big puzzle.
Right.
This game had a lot of kind of go here, talk to this, and leave.
And it doesn't last very long.
No. It's
like
very broken up.
Go to the clock tower and talk to your friend Oracle.
Yeah, even the blimp sections are very short. It's a lot of stop-y-starty.
Yeah. I mean, I do like those little like dungeon moments because they're a little bit more classic Arkham.
Yeah, but they're very short.
Not
brief.
Not as long. So that is an overall complaint, I guess I would say, about this game. In the beginning, you encounter this character, Arkham Knight. He's kind of like Metal Batman, I guess.
Yep.
At
Metal Gear Revengeance Batman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At the Ace Chemicals, where Joker was transformed. Kind of cool. And you have to stop a Scarecrow gas leak where he's going to gas the city, and Batman is being exposed to this gas. You have to take out these canisters very slowly, I believe.
Yep.
And you get a jump scare from your old friend, the Joker here. And what did you think about this, where he showed up?
Oh, it's so, okay, I should mention, there's even an intro before the game starts that threw me.
Oh, where you
have to incinerate the Joker. So I literally sat there.
I forgot about that.
Sat there and waited for something to happen.
Right.
I was like, doop, 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 it's the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And it's prompting you to incinerate him. I said, oh, this is wild.
Yeah.
So they do a good setup here where, I thought he was dead.
Like, no, he's dead.
He's dead. We burnt him up. And then when you're sort of, this fear gas is essentially what I understand is making Batman hallucinate that the Joker is here.
Yeah.
Or that
he's torn up by his guilt.
Yeah.
Over,
so
he's thinking about this is where he was created. He's lodged in my mind now.
Sure. So, and for other people, like the police officer, this fear gas people look like monsters to him.
It affects people differently.
Yeah, sure. So this section where you're essentially as Batman, you're trying to stop the spread of the virus in this Stop the spread of this gas in the city.
Yeah.
You're slowly taking out these canisters, but then Joker shows up.
Right.
I'm like, is it actually Joker? Is it just kind of a fever dream? And you should continue. It's very cool.
So Mark Hamill returns upset. It was a very closely guarded secret, and maybe like my favorite performance of his ever.
Yeah, me too.
like as the Joker, feels like more lines than he's had in the other games.
Yeah.
Even. there are a lot of like Joker moments where he will just keep showing up as you're progressing through it. Like nobody can see him but you.
He almost does like a Hellblade thing where he's almost narrating what
Like your
Batman
internal
is.
thoughts.
Yeah, but he's almost narrating Batman's internal thoughts. Or because Joker isn't actually there, he's kind of, sitting on walls, or like he's in grates with you when you're crawling through. It's really
and
weird.
sort of mocking you and getting to your internal fears and doubts.
Yes.
And I thought that was pretty much like the thing that really stood out to this game was how good the character work in that sense was.
Well, I think it's the best part of the game.
Yeah.
Right, I think so.
Something else that I keep I pitch this game to people as is something I've never seen, I don't think, in a game before, is that this also affects the open world, where you will hallucinate a Joker face or Batman and Joker in imagery or on statues and billboards. I showed it to you last night.
Yes. Like you will actually like hallucinate that an advertisement has Batman and Joker in it.
Yes.
And when you turn around and look back, it's not
normal.
And it's very Hellblade thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's just like little tiny things that kind of make it a little bit more. It puts you in his shoes a little bit better.
Sure,
I like that a lot. It's not like a cutscene moment.
It's awesome.
So a couple other things on the Joker front. I wanted to talk about the flashbacks that you occasionally get. There is the scene where it's from the Killing Joke comic where he paralyzes Barbara, Jim's daughter, who is a Oracle now. She used to be Batgirl. And it's a very like effective. Like, I mean, that scene is pretty notorious, where it's like one of the most cruel things he's ever done. And there's another scene where it shows how he is torturing and winds up beating to death Jason Todd, who is one of the Robins.
Yep.
And it's basically showing how much he has put Batman through over the years.
Let me bring this up for our audience. I didn't know there were multiple Robins.
Okay.
So that's another like thing that would surprise me.
Yeah, he was kind of like the middle child, I guess, that was lost.
Sure.
So you had Nightwing, who was the first one, then it was this guy, and you have the guy who is Robin in the current game.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty crazy. The Joker blood plot line from the previous game finally pays off here in kind of a stupid way. This is something where I'm like, okay, this game's a little silly. Where a select number of civilians who received his blood are now Jokerizing.
It's
and including Batman, because he was infected by it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but he was cured, in the previous one.
And something I don't understand, maybe you can clear up, the quote unquote other Jokers that you've had imprisoned, do they actually look like Joker, or is that an hallucination?
That is a hallucination. Well,
you know what I mean?
I think they kind of look Jokery. I think that's on purpose, but whenever it's actually the Joker, that's a hallucination.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
So you have a couple people. There's like a bodybuilder and like the singer.
He's great.
And who's the other one?
There's the old guy.
The old guy who seems normal.
Yep. There's the woman.
Yes. And it's kind of breaking down the Joker's character into splitting it into different traits, like the obsession with Batman, the woman who's like in love with him.
Yep.
And then the charismatic, the Johnny Charisma is his name.
Yeah, he's great.
And the violent side of him with the bodybuilder guy,
yep.
right? And it pays off reasonably well later. It's just stupid. You know what I mean?
Like, it's silly, but it's cool.
Right, exactly. So Barbara winds up getting kidnapped, and Gordon then goes on a tear because he doesn't know that she helps Batman.
And I didn't know Barbara was Batgirl.
Yeah, it's pretty.
A lot of these are going to happen.
But it's kind of an interesting character arc for her, where she is now like in the support role for him. Mm-hmm. Something that bothered me though is that you at one point see her seemingly commit suicide. And it's done in a very kind of tasteful way,
as much as you can.
It's very like heavy duty, and what I think is crazy is you don't get to see Gordon's reaction to that at all. He's like off camera at the time, like for a while.
Well, from what I remember from that scene, the fear gas enters her chamber.
Yeah,
because essentially Barbara gets kidnapped. You're trying to find her.
Yeah,
you end up finding her. I keep calling it tear gas. The fear gas comes into the chamber. She puts a gun to her head, but then either fake Joker, or I'm not really sure what happens, walks in front of her as she pulls the trigger.
Right, and like points at it like a fake gun in his head, right?
Sure.
So that was kind of a weird part, but the issue I was gonna bring up, like I said, it pays off in a stupid way, but Harley finds the fake Jokers and she winds up breaking them out, and there's a kind of a funny little sequence where you have to hunt them down
in your own sort of base.
It's like it's an old movie studio, which is kind of an interesting location, and you got some fun stuff here. The thing that stands out the most to me is the musical number.
That's
where
great.
Mark Hamill sings a song, and you have to kind of hide from the fake Johnny Charisma Joker, and you have to like take him down like by stealth.
It's cool. It's almost like do you remember the Resident Evil 0 final boss where someone has to distract the boss and someone has to open the windows?
Yes,
it's very similar.
It's between him and Robin, I believe.
Yeah, so Batman distracts Johnny Charisma by listening to the song, and Robin, you play as Robin, and you have to go disarm a bunch of bombs while avoiding this spinning little Majora's Mask mini game song.
Yes, very memorable, fun.
Yeah,
fun
very
sequence.
very cool. I'm trying to make that connection. That's what it looked like to me.
Yes, and another kind of they do a lot of fourth wall stuff in this game. Robin attempts to imprison Batman after the old guy snaps.
Is it Henry Adams?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it winds up, you think he's normal, but he has been like
manipulating you.
The whole time. And that's the manipulative side of Joker.
Yep.
And he sees that Batman is sort of slowly turning himself, and he winds up killing himself.
Yep.
He's like, oh, you're going to be perfect. It's very creepy. But Robin attempts to. He's like, "All right, Batman, get in the box."
Yeah, essentially, Robin tries to put Batman in a prison cell.
The cone or the barrel, your choice.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of funny because you can walk in, and Joker will say, "You don't want to do that," and he'll rewind it and say,
"That happened to me."
Yeah.
Where I thought I had to, so I did.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he's like, come on, Bat. Like, if you do it repeatedly, he's like, come on, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And you wind up putting Robin in the prison because you don't want him to find out that Barbara died because they're dating. And it's very much like, I'm like, oh man. So Batman is kind of like morally compromising at this, but he's like putting people in prison. He's putting his friend in prison.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Where is it the Joker affecting his mind?
He's kind of misbehaving.
But is it is he doing it because he thinks it's important? So I like that a lot. Scarecrow winds up stealing this chemical dispersal agent to unleash his gas called the Cloudburst from the airships. Yeah, and I like all the little physics puzzles here. It was a pretty cool segment where you have to kind of tilt them.
You have to tilt the blimp.
Yeah, you control them that way. I like that. It was something different, you know? And this is kind of where we checked in last night, where Gotham is covered in the poison gas.
Any Ego Draconis fans out there, anybody play Divinity, you'll know exactly what this is.
It looks very cool.
Yeah,
I think
mm-hmm.
it's
essentially the city's covered in this layer of fear gas.
It looks like almost like daytime. It's very bright, and it's a totally different sort of skyline.
Yep.
Where you have to stay above the clouds of like orange deadly gas that's infecting the city. There is a very kind of frustrating boss fight here with the tank, where you have to like sneak up on it and hit it a couple times that we struggled with a little bit. An even more frustrating part where you're in the tunnels and you have to run away from.
You have to run from Propeller Man.
So what did I compare this to? This is like the big drill that you have to run away from underground. Like Resident Evil 4, I think.
Yeah. If you can imagine like Propeller Man from Resident Evil 8, and you can imagine Ashley controlling the propeller thing from Resident Evil 4, it's kind of like that.
It's very frustrating. You have to drive away from it super fast and avoid these obstacles.
Do you know what I just thought of? Are the puzzle bosses in Arkham Knight only in the car? Are there no puzzle bosses outside of being in the Batmobile? It's possible.
In the main story, you may be right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of annoying, but that is where the Batmobile gets destroyed, and you were like, yeah,
and you knew it was coming back. I said, oh, thank God.
It's so funny. And Poison Ivy, I forgot, figures prominently into this game, where she has a little redemption arc,
mm-hmm.
where she filters out the toxin with the giant plants. And at this point, you're kind of getting into the end game. And so the Arkham Knight here is revealed to be Jason Todd, who survived the second Robin. And a lot of people had a problem with this because they marketed it as a original villain. But this is actually kind of a rehash of a story called Red Hood, or Under the Red Hood, I believe. And it's pretty much beat for beat, not like all the militia stuff and everything.
Yeah.
But like him coming back after he thought he was dead and wearing that red. That's when he takes off that mask. It turns into the red thing.
I didn't mind this.
No, I don't know. I mean, so this is another thing where you were surprised by it.
Yes, that's it. I get the bonus of not knowing who any of these people are.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good twist ultimately, but it's just that it's been done before, so people had a problem with it.
Which wouldn't affect me.
Exactly.
Yep.
Kind of interesting. The Arkham connection there is a little thin because I remember they start out like find the Arkham City patients, find the Arkham Asylum patients, and it winds up being that the connection is sort of to throw him off, and that Robin was he was being tortured in the basement of Arkham Asylum for like a year, and that's like kind of where it came from, I guess. But it's kind of thin as far as I'm concerned. You rescue Oracle here. It turns out she's alive. It was just a fear gas trick. And Gordon and the new Robin are kidnapped at this point, and you kind of are forced to surrender your gadgets to Scarecrow, and he's like, get in the back of the van or whatever, and he's going to take you to an undisclosed location. And there's like kind of an interesting like fake out here where you think it crashes.
Yes.
And you wind up wandering around Crime Alley again, and you get mobbed by Jokers. It's like all Jokers.
It's like a very Matrixy.
Yeah, like the Agent Smith clone fight or whatever. And what winds up happening is Batman, it's sort of like an internal struggle where you're seeing him break down a little bit, where his KOs are getting more and more brutal, like doing like backbreakers and stuff. And what winds up happening is you have to break his neck. And this is one of those situations where you're like, what happens if I do nothing? And I said nothing. I tried. I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but it's kind of interesting either way. But it's essentially like Batman is sort of losing his grip on his morality, his sanity at this point. And what winds up happening is you get brought back to Arkham Asylum. So you have a little full circle moment here. Scarecrow winds up revealing his true identity to the world, which I don't think I've ever seen before in any Batman story. So that was kind of interesting how that's going to like, ripple into like, oh shit, that's a pretty high stakes thing. And what winds up happening here is kind of interesting, where he injects you directly with fear toxin, and you have a very strange sequence where it seems like Joker is going to control his mind, and you see like his plans for Gotham, and there's a weird like third person shooter and then first person shooter.
Yeah, there's like an FPS Joker moment.
Yeah, and
really
it's
weird.
kind of funny because it's like, I don't know, were they saying something with that? Like if Batman was a lesser character, he would descend into kind of a more mindless gaming experience. You know? So kind of funny, and you kind of shoot down like the other villains and stuff, and you're flipping back and forth. Gordon's like, "What are you doing? Like, please stop!" And there's a really cool little part where you see it looks like Joker's funeral. You're like in a tomb. Yeah, and you see these newspapers that says Joker dies, Gotham doesn't care.
Yeah. So he's afraid of being forgotten.
That's like his fear. Yeah. So you're tapping into that.
Yeah, Joker's fears.
And there's another one that says Riddler and Harley Quinn expecting first baby.
It's so funny.
Very cute. But you wind up being you find this Batman statue that you can shoot apart, and it's another one of those camera tricks where every time you turn around, there's another one.
Yep.
And you gradually sort of wind up being surrounded by them, and he jumps out at one at you. It's very cool. And what winds up happening is you have to like wrestle him. It's sort of an ironic final boss where you have to wrestle him into this metaphorical prison.
Yep.
That looks like the Tower of Latria.
Yep.
From Demon's Souls. So that is like pretty much the end. And Scarecrow is injected with his own toxin here, and he's taken away in the paddy wagon.
Yep.
And I think it's fascinating to me because there is so much more to this game that you haven't seen, because I 100%ed it. So there's all these other side quests. And this is kind of getting back into that criticism of Arkham City, where these are not as like this stuff is missable, but I feel like it adds so much necessary stuff to the experience. Where I wish they were kind of baked in.
Yeah,
a little
for
bit
sure.
more.
Where it's kind of the same issue, right? Where there's a lot of cool stuff. Like I experienced Two-Face and was it Firefly?
Yeah.
Like I experienced them a little bit, but you have to go on these distractions to experience it, and it feels sloggy.
Yeah.
Where I wish they were baked in.
Right, exactly. So I wanted to quickly rhyme off some of the optional content in this one before we get to the end. There is, so I wound up with the Game of the Year edition or whatever, so I played all this shit. There's a flashback episode where you play as Batgirl. And you go against Joker in his prime. I'm like, this should have been Origins. You should have had a Batgirl game instead, you know?
Can't go back now.
Yeah, exactly. But you do get a little bit of a flash forward where you can play as Robin, Nightwing, Catwoman, and eventually Red Hood. So, and this is kind of a remarkable one because he uses guns, and I'm like, dude, this fucking slaps.
Yeah,
like
right?
It's like Arkham Combat with like handguns is really cool.
So Devil May Cry.
Yeah, well, no, it's a little bit like tighter, like in that sense, where it's kind of part of the experience. But you get some character resolutions. Speaking of like all the side quest stuff, we didn't mention the GCPD base is like kind of like a fun little home base where you can interact with the villains that you've captured.
Yeah.
And you can keep track of your progress. You kind of slowly add more people to the prison here. And so I'm going to just rhyme off like the ones that you can get in here. The militia subplots. I found most of these like pretty fun in terms of that it's no bullshit. It's just like the Arkham gameplay. There's a lot of just sort of, these sort of objectives. And it culminates somewhat disappointingly where you fight a character called Deathstroke. And he was in Arkham Origins as a significant character. He's kind of a superhero assassin. But what they wind up doing here, instead of having a fist fight with him, which is what you did in that game, is there's another tank battle. And it's like, dude, come on. I don't know if they ran out of time or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's the fireman rescue thing, which I believe you did a little bit of.
Yep.
So how this turns out is you're rescuing firemen, and what happens is the chief was helping start the fires, like working with Firefly to keep his men employed. And what winds up happening is that he gets thrown in with the other supervillains. I'm like, this guy, all right, that's pretty bad, but he doesn't deserve this.
Come on.
So that's kind of funny. You mentioned Firefly. I kind of like these where you're chasing after him. He's spreading fires behind you. He has a jetpack. You have to chase after him. Of course, we have a Riddler situation here.
Skip.
Yeah, slightly more manageable than last time. Where collecting trophies and solving riddles gives you keys to unlock Catwoman's like bomb collar, I guess. It's like kind of like a cat collar. It's cute. But you fight some robots here, and you wind up beating the shit out of him finally because he's giving you so much trouble. So, and I didn't mention there's a Riddler informant I showed you at the GCPD. There's one cop.
He's funny.
Is working for him. And you can throw him in jail because obviously Batman knows somehow. He's like, but Batman, I didn't do anything wrong. And he goes,
I don't care.
One of the funniest lines. So, and then you get some clues off of him. It's pretty funny. Hey, you mentioned Two-Face with the bank robberies, Penguin, just kind of some weapons cache stuff, like some of these co-op stuff with Nightwing and all that. Wanted to mention the Hush thing with the face from the previous game I mentioned, where he's creating Bruce Wayne's face.
I encountered this.
You did it?
With Lucius Fox, right?
It's not even like a side quest. It's just kind of like putting a bow on the end of that story. Yeah, like where you...
That was awesome. That was also that was really surprising.
Right.
Where I thought it was like a fear gas thing.
Yeah.
But no, it's is it Clayface or whatever?
Hush is the character.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, so this... does have a factor on whether or not you've beat the main story, because you have a guy who looks exactly like Bruce Wayne, and he knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. So after the main story, this doesn't matter. So he says, doesn't matter anymore, Lucius. Like, everybody knows. And if you do it before that, he's like, just lock him in the basement. We'll figure it out later. I thought it was
That's
really
awesome.
funny. But yeah, did you do the mission with the Deacon?
No.
So this is the reporter that's in the police station.
Oh, Jack Ryder?
Yes, he gets kidnapped by this cult, and they're on that that big statue in the middle of the harbor. You wind up going there, and it's like this big sort of mass fight where you have to fight all of them to rescue this guy. And it's just kind of like an interesting, like, oh, okay, like he's a very minor villain, but it's kind of cool that you have that there. You have a Ra's al Ghul final appearance where he is now dying, and you have to choose between saving him and helping Talia's sister, which is kind of interesting. And I chose to like save him just to see what happens, and he winds up killing her. I'm like, oh shit, oops.
Jesus, oops.
You get some closure with Mr. Freeze. Unfortunately, his wife's like hyperbaric chamber like breaks, and they have like a very sweet kind of moment where she's like the last few hours of her life or whatever. The Mad Hatter comes back at one point, and I was like, how are they going to top the last? Because the last time was really trippy, and they do something really interesting where you wind up having to play through a gigantic like storybook where it's like, it's showing Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and I thought I liked that a lot. Something else that is very unique is the Man Bat. Do you want to talk about your experience with this?
So what I said to you in a messenger chat was this Arkham Knight spooked me a couple of times.
Yeah.
Where the way, I don't know if this happens every time, but the way I encountered Man Bat was I was gliding around buildings, and when I went to pull myself up on a rooftop, he was just in my face.
Yes.
I was like,
very
Jesus.
scary stuff.
Yeah, it's very spooky. Joker does that to you at one point too.
Yes.
So very cool where you have to, this guy becomes this Man Bat, and you have to sort of come up with a cure, and then you have to track him down because he's flying around and inject him with it in midair.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I like this. It's very short.
Yeah,
but
I like it. It's
you
cool.
get some XP from all these too, which is another bonus to doing them. He's a pretty funny character. Like you have Batman and Man Bat. It's just very ridiculous. Another character we mentioned, Azrael. What winds up happening with him in this game, he wants to be your successor.
Yes.
So you have to play as him and like prove yourself to Batman essentially. And what winds up happening is Batman realizes that this guy has been brainwashed, and he's being controlled by this cult to replace Batman and like take control of the city and stuff. So what winds up happening is you can either choose to attack Batman or not. And you kind of hear this like chanting in the background, like motivating him to do it. And what happens is if you attack Batman, Batman will obviously, he'll know you're coming and just hit you and throw you in jail. But if you don't, he winds up breaking his sword and apologizing to Batman. He says, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm going to do my part. And I'm like, oh, I love that. I love that there's a little option for this subplot,
Sure.
Killer Croc has a final appearance here. He is in a crashed prison blimp, which is really cool because you have kind of a water level, which doesn't suck somehow. And you wind up having like he's grown so much over the course because he's different every time you see him, and he's grown so much that he's almost like a Godzilla figure. You have to have so that is one like in-person boss fight that I like. That is a side content thing, And lastly, I'm like hesitant to almost even, because I really want you to experience it yourself. There's a very odd villain in this game called Professor Pig, and he is like, so you find these bodies strung up everywhere.
I did most of them.
The opera in the background, but you didn't finish this part, right?
I did most of them.
If you ever go back to it, you really need to see how this pays off, because it is like, all I'll say is that it is one of the most disgusting things I've seen in a video game.
Okay.
It's very just something about it like just knots your stomach a little bit. He's very like creepy. I definitely recommend playing that one. But yeah, so once you finish all this stuff, you get the true ending, which is the Nightfall protocol, where they essentially just blow up Wayne Manor and pretend that Bruce Wayne and Alfred die, because they're just like faking their death because the secret's out.
Right, sure.
And you get a very, very strange final scene. I don't know if you looked it up yet, where if you 100% it, you see kind of thugs about to harass a family, very similar to Bruce's upbringing. And what winds up happening is it's completely unexplained, where a sort of ghostly figure appears on a rooftop and it winds up like spreading these enormous bat wings and flying down at them in like this burst of smoke and fire. And I don't know if it's like, so is he using like the scarecrow gas now? Is that what they're implying?
Or maybe.
Or is it something? It's left open-ended. Okay. That's basically what I'm saying.
They're taking advantage of the fear gas for good use or something.
I guess. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting, more abstract ending than I expected.
Yeah.
So I guess I think it's time to get into, this has been a very intense, very exhaustive, thorough retrospective here on this series, getting into final thoughts overall. The strengths of this particular title, I think, are its fluidity, scale, and character work.
Mm-hmm.
I would describe this overall as one of AAA Games' great trilogies, considering especially how very meh I feel about the last decade. Like you had Arkham City and Night came out the past decade. Those are some pretty robust titles, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Despite their shortcomings, despite maybe not being as tight as Arkham Asylum.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't describe any particular title, as I mentioned, as the definitive Batman experience. And unlike we mentioned, we're going to have a Dead Space episode coming out at some point. This feels to me more like a cohesive story, a beginning, middle, and end than that trilogy does.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, sure, of course. So Arkham trilogy for me. So like I said in the beginning, I came into these games having very little knowledge on the universe. So every plot point or every villain reveal to me is all new. I don't know who anyone is or what their convictions are or why.
Right.
To me, it mostly came to my benefit, where there may be fans who are very into the comics, very into the animated series, who know what all these people are. They get it.
Right.
Maybe they're very critical of the motivations because they know it already.
Right.
To me, everything is new.
Yeah.
So when I had to do the section where there's a fake Bruce Wayne, I said, who is this? I don't know. I don't know what this is at all. So it's very surprising. And so if I'm thinking about the series as a whole, number one, like the free-flowing combat system has influenced games forever because it's still in place.
Mm-hmm.
Arkham Asylum is incredibly tight and focused, and you did that very cool combination of stealth and combat together. It's almost like Arkham Asylum just took you know how Splinter Cell has become shitty? They took like shitty Splinter Cell and made it good in a Batman universe.
And you get your puzzles too.
Right, of course. They do stuff that I love, where you get the combination of really stealth, combat, and puzzle solving.
Things that I like, all things I like about games where you're, it rewards using your head.
Yeah, of course. It respects your intellect as well.
As it gets better, it gets more heady as it goes along.
Sure.
I guess.
I think the flaws in Batman, there are some open world pitfalls with City. Sure. I don't like vehicle sequences and driving sequences, so those parts of Night I kind of roll my eyes.
Sure.
I want to get out of the Batmobile. I don't want to do it.
Would you maybe give that one like a B-?
We talking grades for Arkham Knight? You know what's so hard? I think tonally Arkham Knight was so cool and it was so serious that that appeals to me.
Sure.
Like, I feel like maybe I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. I want a game to be very serious. Mm-hmm. When you have like the fever dream jokers and the fear gas and the opening sequence, and this game spooked me a few times.
Yeah.
I want to. It's almost one of these games where I hesitate to say I didn't like playing it, but I really I enjoyed the experience. It teeters there.
Yeah.
Right? I might put these Batmans in descending order, where it's B plus B and B minus.
Okay,
kind of.
And I'm going to have a very boring answer here, but this is the season of eights. This is another. So it's kind of in line with maybe like these later two games, maybe lower eights. Arkham Asylum a higher 8. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to revise my reviewing.
I go with grades.
Yeah, but no, I mean, so these are all. I think these are all great games. I think if you haven't played them, I mean, we pretty much just told you everything about them, but I still think they're worth playing.
Mm-hmm. I would actually recommend if you don't know anything about superheroes, you should play them because you'd actually get more out of it.
You don't need to know to be a Batman expert.
Yeah, sure.
Lastly, I wanted to mention that there is a game coming out this year by the Origins team called Gotham Knights.
Oh boy.
I don't like the look of it at all. It looks very much like that Avengers game that Square put out with like the leveling up and whatnot and the microtransactions and all that. But Rocksteady is currently working on a Suicide Squad game.
Okay.
So, I mean, maybe I'll give it a shot. I kind of wish they would do something that's like non-IP just to see what it's like. After they've really polished their, kind of game output over time. I'd like to see those lessons applied to something original, maybe.
Yep.
But I'll give it a shot when it comes out.
Sure.
Any other thoughts or?
No, I think so. I think we're this has been long. I think we're running on 2 hours here. So thank you guys for listening through this. We definitely recommend these games. And we'll catch you guys next time on Goddamn GameCube. Thank you very much.